So I've noticed a trend over the past several years where it seems like most of the big YouTube channels, especially like when you're talking about the big, like the YouTube commentary community, that whole thing, like most people seem to be just straight up pro Xbox, anti Sony. When a negative story comes out against Sony, like the layoffs that they've been doing, oh, they jump on that shit like sharks. But if something goes on with Microsoft, they are radio silent. Like it's just crazy, like how so many of these big YouTube channels are just blatantly pro Xbox and biased towards Xbox and Phil Spencer and Microsoft, to the point where like you cannot really trust them to give reliable coverage because they have such strong hatred and dislike towards Sony as a corporation. Like, it's just so weird. To be fair, many years ago, I would say like from 2013 to 2017, 2018, it was the opposite. Most people were just straight up pro Sony, anti Xbox. I mean, to be fair, back then I feel like Microsoft deserved it with their always online DRM shit, which they did reverse, but still, like Don Matrick era of Xbox was not very good, and it was definitely well deserved, a lot of the backlash and negativity that they were receiving at the time. But Microsoft kind of was able to turn around their reputation a little bit, weren't able to win the console generation at the end of the day against Sony and the PlayStation 4, but they've made it clear that they don't really necessarily care anymore about selling more consoles than their competitor. They care more about subscriptions, selling online services like Game Pass, than they actually do about delivering quality games. And like it just shows, like they haven't really had that many really good first party games over the past decade. You can only really name like 3 or 4 of them. You can name Gears of War, you can name, I guess you could say, Starfield, you could Forza, yeah, and that's pretty much it. Like if we're gonna go into it, talk about State of Decay, Crackdown 3, like and all these other games that they've released over the years. They didn't really release that many, but the ones that they did, most of them were mid or just complete dog shit. That if you were to try to argue that the Xbox One had a better lineup of exclusives than the PS4 did, like you just completely lack any credibility. I'm sorry, but that's just the case. As much as I'm not a fan of the PS4 lineup of games, I think the PS3 had a much better exclusive lineup than the PS4, and it's not even close, okay? But when we're comparing the first-party games from Sony to that of Microsoft over the past decade plus, maybe even longer than that, it's not even close. So I think just recognizing that, but people just won't, because Sony bad, Microsoft good. Xbox Game Pass is so good. You pay $10 a month. It's like the EBT card of video games. You get all these video games. You get hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of games that you could play with one subscription. Well, you get what you pay for. That's how the saying goes, right? And the quality of these games, especially the day one release games, are not very good. They just aren't. They don't feel like premium quality games that you would pay full price for, because they're not. And even Starfield, the thing about Bethesda games, they don't really truly become good until the modding scene is fully developed. Like Skyrim, for example, I can't imagine playing vanilla Skyrim or vanilla Fallout 4. Definitely not that. So with Starfield, I'm not going to really get into that game until there are a shit ton of mods, till they release the creation engine and all that stuff. Because Bethesda is just so weird. They give like they have a good baseline for games, but it's really when the modding scene and when these mod creators get into it and sink their teeth into it that it really truly becomes something spectacular. So yeah, I'm not really going to talk about Starfield that much. But what I do find interesting is that the bias really shows with all these big channels, because when people were talking about some bugs that were happening with Starfield, radio silence. But when Spider-Man 2 had a couple of bugs, which weren't even that bad, like all the people I've talked to that actually own Spider-Man 2 and have played it said, yeah, there really aren't that many bugs that really have that much of an effect on the gameplay experience. Maybe there's like 1 or 2 cutscene bugs, like where certain characters are just invisible and disappear. For the most part, it's really not that bad. But oh my god, all these big YouTube channels, I'm not going to name names because they really, like, I don't really want to get into the whole drama thing. I'm kind of really past that point in my life to really get in it with other people online. Like, I think when you're in your mid-20s and you're trying to beef with people online, it's sad. I'm not even trying to beef with these people, But I know that if I name drop somebody, then I'm gonna get a whole like shitstorm of people coming after me. And I think, it would strengthen my argument to actually provide examples, but I don't want to. I really don't want to get into that. It just seems like something from my own perception as someone that watches YouTube content and like, just watches people talk about video games, and I'm someone that also talks about video games myself, but it seems like the sentiment has definitely changed. Like, not just from YouTubers, but the gaming community as a whole. Everyone seems to love Phil Spencer and Xbox and hates Sony and just drags on them any chance they can get. And look, is Sony like a great company? They're definitely not. And I'm not a fan of them. I haven't really been invested in Sony since like 2017 or 2018. Like pretty much since I got my gaming PC, I quit. My PS4 became a dust collector essentially, and I never bought the PS5. So hey, if you guys are trying to like be like, oh, this guy, he's only going after Microsoft fanboys because he is a Sony fanboy. I'm a PC gamer mainly, and I think that's the thing. Is that I feel like the vast majority of PC gamers kind of feel obligated to stand up for Phil Spencer and do free PR for Microsoft because, yeah, Microsoft has done a lot of great things for the PC gaming community, namely releasing all their games day one on Xbox along with the PC, and for the most part, they're actually pretty damn good PC ports. Sony, on the other hand, is a lot less consistent with PC games. They'll release the game on PC, like, maybe 2 or 3 years after the game comes out, and it'll also be like a complete buggy mess. Well, it actually started off not that way. Like their PC games started off actually pretty decent, but in like the recent entries, especially the Last of Us Part 1, oof. And also Ratchet and Clank, I think, also had some issues there with glitches and bugs for the PC. So yeah, if you're a PC gamer, you kind of like feel like you need to be more pro Xbox than pro Sony. But I can't think of like I can't feel the urge to side with one mega corporation over the other, defend one mega corporation to the death, and just shit on the other one and pretend that one is so much worse than the other. Like, really? Yeah, I mean, Microsoft with Game Pass, people kind of like what they're doing with that. I have my own problems against Game Pass, and that's honestly, like, one of the things that I have against Microsoft is Game Pass, and also the big acquisition of Activision. I'm also against that too. I'm not going to get into all that because then it'll be like a 20-something long minute video, and it's stuff I already talked about, so if you want to hear me talk about those things, then you could look up my videos talking about that. That's just how tribalism works. If you're a left-wing YouTube creator that, focuses on politics, you're going to spend 95% of your energy, 95% of your content is going to be making fun of and pushing back against like the bad things that right-wing people are doing, but you're not going to really talk that much about bad things that are happening on the left if you are a left-wing YouTuber or whatever. Like, that's just how it is with politics, and to a lesser extent also with video games. It's just like these people are just like, they're trying to act like they're objective and unbiased, but their bias is very, very, very clear when, like, if anything bad happens with Xbox, there's no coverage. Anytime, or they'll cover it, but it'll be severely damage controlled to the point where they'll be like, oh, it's really not that big of a deal. Oh, anytime, like the littlest thing with Sony though, they are going to like just really, really go after Sony, and it just doesn't feel like there is like equal balanced coverage anymore. It just doesn't seem like that. I mean, you could argue that it never was, but it's just like ridiculous now, I feel. At the end of the day, these are both giant corporations that care, like their entire purpose of existing is to just continuously generate profits, and they don't care about the average consumer. You're just a means to an end to make them more money. And while Microsoft has done some things that are just objectively good, like backwards compatibility and putting their games on PC, which honestly isn't really a good thing if you're a console gamer because it just completely defeats the entire purpose of having a console. If you have a console in 2023, you really need to reevaluate your life. Anyway, it's just irritating that people are pretending that there aren't also some bad things that Microsoft has done, like buying up all these AAA publishers and locking their games to their own platforms, locking it out of Sony. Microsoft has said they'll put their games on the PlayStation if Sony lets Game Pass come to the PlayStation. Like, Game Pass is all they care about. They want to turn video games into a subscription and just completely ruin the artistic integrity and quality of video games as we know it. And that's what's going to happen. They're going to become Netflix, and like all the shit's going on with streaming, where they just put all this money into all these shows, cancel them after like 2 seasons and all that shit. Like the nightmare that's going on with TV streaming and movie streaming right now is going to happen to video games in the next 5 years, and it's all going to be Microsoft's fault. People are praising Game Pass now. In a few years, they're going to wish it never existed. It's just funny, though. There's this guy, he's a self-proclaimed socialist, right? And he talks about all this left-wing stuff. He's a Bernie Sanders guy. He talks about regulating the big corporations and breaking up the big monopolies. This same guy who says all that stuff politically was jumping up and down when Microsoft's acquisition of Activision was confirmed and it was official. Like, it's like, do you lack complete self-awareness, my guy? But you gotta do what you gotta do to trigger the Sony ponies, am I right? I mean, anytime he makes a video making fun of Sony and the Sony fanboys, it gets a shit ton of views. Like, I mean, that's a pretty capitalist move right there. For a socialist, this guy really is doing capitalism very, very, very well, and seems to be benefiting from capitalism, making a living off of getting high all day and making reaction videos to these idiots online. I mean, hey, you know, whatever works for you is fine. Like I said, I'm not hating you. You're more successful than I am, so credit where credit's due. I'm just saying, in a socialist utopia that you seem to want, you wouldn't be able to do any of the shit that you're doing right now. Capitalism seems to have done really good things for you, my dude. My main problem with these people is not necessarily that they're Xbox shills. It's like, just say you're an Xbox shill. Like, JTech TV says, yeah, I'm a Sony fanboy. Like, it's pretty clear that he is. He's not pretending to be, like, this neutral, unbiased source, as much as he's something else, I'll say that. You know, but there are a lot of guys where you know where they stand, and they make it clear where they stand, even if you don't agree with where they stand, and they're pretty easy to ridicule. I can respect that to an extent. But what I don't respect are people who are just blatantly, like, they clearly show a bias. 99.9% of their videos are anti-Sony, and there's barely anything that they'll ever say that is critical, even slightly critical of Microsoft. Yet, they try to pretend like, oh, no, we're not biased. Well, we're completely neutral. We don't, you know, play the whole tribalist console war. That's for children, yet you're participating in it completely. Like, shut up. But I want to hear from you guys. Do you guys think I'm just crazy? Am I smoking crack? Am I just imagining the fact that, like, everyone's all of a sudden, like, just so biased towards Xbox? Something has definitely shifted over the past couple of years. A lot of it, like, it's just Game Pass is the big part of it, and also PC gamers feel like they need to be pro Xbox because of what they've done for the PC community. I get all that, but at the same time, you guys one day are going to regret being so up Microsoft's ass, because they're going to cause a lot of long-term damage to the video game industry. Y'all are too foolish not to see that.